Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from the lunch. This is a hard time of day, but please stay awake with us for another couple of hours or so. In our final session of the day, or the penultimate session, there will be another keynote speaker later. In this session, we follow, in a way, in a logical order from what we have been doing so far today. We started with sustainability. We talked a lot about various aspects of sustainability, and then we continued with market efficiency and that. And then in this session, we are focused, as the title says, is focused on policy and regulation. That's where the buck stops, essentially. We can have lots of good theories and analysis and so on, and this is the area we need a lot of new things, and that's where essentially both policy and regulation, they are both lagging behind where we should be, and we need a lot of new insights. And I hope we will get some of it from our colleagues during this session. We have 4 papers for you on the role of, and the subtle role of government, the decentralization and generation of renewables by Tobias Albrecht. And then the Iberian exception, we will hear a little bit more on it from Natalia Collado. And then the third paper would be on net zero transition and welfare, the general equilibrium model results by Javier Ferri. And then finally, our previous chair, Monica Giulietti, will talk about their latest research on fuel poverty in the case of the UK. Without further ado, please, Tobias, would you like to? And we know, you know the drill, 15 minutes, and I have my things here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm giving my best. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, also from my side. I'm of course very honored to be able to present to you my current research, which is joint work with Enrique Lopez Pazo and Monica Serrano, and is on the subtle role of governmental decentralization on the generation of renewable electricity. As being part of this third panel on policies and regulation, I would like to talk about a type of policy which is highly underrepresented in the literature, but might extend the policy discussion about an important dimension, and this is the regional and local dimension. The main motivation for this analysis is quite straightforward. We all know about the central role of electricity from renewable sources in the ongoing renewable energy transition. At the same time, these energy sources, compared to the conventional energy resources like fossil fuels, are distributed and decentralizing energy governments and systems. So this highlights the element of the institutional framework and the structure and decentralization specifically. The general importance of renewable energy has motivated a large strand of literature analyzing potential enabling and distorting factors for the renewable energy deployment. Next to classical determinants like GDP or emissions, in recent years, institutional factors were analyzed in the literature, including institutional quality and the organization of governments. In terms of organization, the effect of decentralization on various economic outcomes has been studied for quite a long time, but only recently the effect on environmental outcomes has been studied. Even more recent, the effect of decentralization on energy outcomes was studied, but the literature is quite sparse, only containing 3 publications. considering China and only 7 OECD countries, and only considering fiscal decentralization, the fiscal dimension of decentralization. Based on all of this, the central research questions of the work are what effect does governmental decentralization have on the renewable energy employment, which importance do political and administrative dimensions of decentralization have compared to the fiscal dimension, and does only the regional or local autonomy of the subnational governments matter or drive the influence, or also the influence of regional governments on the national level. And the second part of the research questions is about the moderating effect of institutional equality, and if there's such a moderating effect, if this is just because of the level of development, or is it the same for all countries? Okay. The work can be broadly divided into 2 parts. The first being the derivation of theoretical mechanisms through which decentralization potentially enhances renewable energy deployment, which you can see in summary here, but due to the lack of time, I cannot really go into detail. But generally, they can be either direct or indirect. Direct would impact directly the resources at subnational government levels to invest into renewable energies, and the indirect impacts would affect the potential in investing into renewable energies. The different mechanisms are about fiscal decentralization, about democratization, efficiency, the influence of regional governments on the central government, which is the shared rule, and regional policy autonomy. Regarding the second part of the work, we have a quite large data set containing 73 countries from 1990 to 2018. And for example, in 2018, this sample covered 97% of global renewable electricity generation. The main variables of the study are the outcome variable, which is the share of renewable electricity generation, excluding hydroelectricity. Then we have, compared to the earlier studies, we have a more holistic and comprehensive indicator for decentralization, which also takes into account, next to fiscal decentralization, the political and administrative dimensions. And finally, for institutional quality, we use the quality of government index. Our econometric specification, the most important part here is that we include an interaction term of regional authority and quality of government, so that the effect of decentralization varies with the level of institutional quality. We deploy a comprehensive set of controls suggested in the literature, and also control for time and country fixed effects. Due to the characteristics of the outcome variable data characteristics, we deploy a Poisson pseudo maximum likelihood estimation technique, and the baseline results In column 2, we don't include the interaction term of decentralization and institutional quality. We found a highly significant and strong impact of governmental decentralization on the share of renewable electricity, which seems to be in line with previous findings in terms of fiscal decentralization. Our preferred specification is in the third column, where we include the interaction term, and the negative interaction term indicates that the impact of decentralization decreases with increasing levels of institutional quality, so that the effect is stronger in a country where the institutions are poor or weak, and less strong in countries where institutions are better. Which is a novelty of the study, this interaction, this moderating effect. We deployed a set of robustness checks, which generally are in line with the main findings and the arguments made. To highlight are the last two columns, where we include the first and the fourth leg of the of decentralization to try to mitigate endogeneity problems of simultaneity and reverse causality. Still, doing all that, there still can be some sort of endogeneity problem. We already deploy a large set of controls, the fixed effects, and use the lect, but still there can be this issue due to measurement error in the decentralization or in the regional authority index. So learning from the literature, we identified two potential or likely exogenous instruments and deployed an IV estimation technique to instrument for the level of decentralization. Due to the non-linear estimation technique, we had to apply a different approach based on Wooldridge and Bates. And basically, the results confirm the found relationship, but indicate that the fixed effects estimation might be a lower bound of the effect, so that we kept on, also because of so we kept the fixed effects estimations. Another key characteristic of the indicator as of regional authority is that it consists of these subdimensions. So we tested if only the self-autonomy or also the influence of regional governments on the central government are important. And in the lower part of the slide, you see the different dimensions of the self-rule, which can be broadly divided into political and administrative and fiscal ones. And the main results are that both subdimensions, self and shared rule, are highly or overall important for the effect, and that political decentralization might have a higher relevance compared to the fiscal dimensions of decentralization, which overall might validate the previously derived shared rule mechanism and the mechanisms of, for example, democratization, efficiency, and regional policy. Thinking of the baseline result with the increasing effect of decentralization depending on institutional quality, one might think that this effect is due to the level of development, as these groups show significantly different levels of institutional quality. So we split the sample into developing and developed countries, as are shown here. And although the coefficients seem quite different, at the mean level of institutional quality, the effect is more or less the same. But only in developed countries we observe this decreasing effect of decentralization. So that this moderating role of institutional quality is only a thing in developed countries. I think we just heard the main findings. Overall, the research might indicate that policies related to fiscal and political decentralization may stimulate the renewable energy deployment and the renewable energy transition, but not necessarily through direct resources, but probably durch the liberation of economic forces and active participation of regional and local agents. And furthermore, renewable energy policies in high income or high institutional qualities are most commonly at central or national level, so this might be the cause of this kind of decreasing effect of institutional quality in high developed countries. So that one implication might be that in high income or high institutional quality countries, the renewable energy policies should or would benefit from a more or less central but also more regionally thought approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Natalia Collado on the Iberian exception and gas price cap. Bear with me.
Let me take this time to thank. Can you hear me? Okay. No. Let me take this time until the presentation is started to thank the organizing committee for giving us the opportunity to present this work. This way I'm stealing some minutes from the presentation. What we try to do with this work is to try to estimate the impact of a novel measure that was implemented in the Iberian Peninsula and that consisted on a, okay, now here we go. That consisted on a cap on gas prices used for electricity generation, and that Natalia has very kindly introduced and explained during her keynote speak. So she has already helped me with that. I will begin by briefly outlining the context in which the measure arises, how it works, and the research questions we want to answer. Then I will describe the methodology we used and move on to the results. And finally, I will summarize the main findings and some limitations we encountered during the analysis. First of all, why there was a need to act or to reduce electricity prices in Europe. As we have seen in the morning, since the summer of 2021, gas prices escalated, and this had a significant impact on electricity markets, specifically the day-ahead ones. As you can see in this graph, in black, the TTF Dutch price for gas, and the color line represents other electricity spot markets in Europe. And why is that the escalation in gas prices is translated into higher electricity prices? Mainly because of two reasons. Because gas is used as an input in electricity generation, and because combined cycle power plants are usually the marginal technology in the market, meaning that is the last unit needed to cover demand, and as such it sets the price for all the market. But what about Spain? Well, the situation was particularly worrying here because first, a significant part of the population was under the regulated tariff, the BPSC for its acronym in English, which is directly linked to the results of the day-ahead market. And also, this is the tariff for many vulnerable households, and since it's a prerequisite for access, the measure to alleviate energy poverty in the electricity segment. And also, the National Consumer Price Index only included, until recently, BPSC data, which overestimated the contribution of electricity prices to inflation. So against this background, Spain and Portugal proposed this new mechanism to reduce day-ahead wholesale electricity prices through decoupling gas and electricity prices, and which is known as the Iberian exception or the gas cap. But what's this mechanism? It's no more than a compensation for electricity generation power plants that use gas and coal, and is calculated as the difference between the Iberian wholesale market gas price, the MIP gas, and a reference price. This reference price started at 40 euros per megawatt hour and increased progressively over the months. And this allowed generators to recover their cost and lower their bids in the market, thus reducing prices and inframarginal rents, as Natalia has pointed out, without distorting the efficiency of the market. The costs are covered by the demand and are diminished by congestion rents. And what's the impact for consumer? Well, in this representation, we can see what's the potential impact. On the right-hand side, you can see that the cost of the compensation in red is lower than the increase in the extra benefit of consumer of lower inframarginal rents. That it's the extra rectangle to the left of the red rectangle that represents the cost. And with our work, what we try to do is precisely to test if this theoretical effect holds up in reality. But we go a step further, and also considering the design of the mechanism, we think if there are another side effects we should be aware of, and in particular, we are worried if the mechanism incentivizes a change in the use of the different generation technologies, and in particular, gas-fired power plants. And why this is important? Because we need to keep in mind that this measure was enacted in parallel to a commitment to reduce gas consumption in the EU. And the other side effect we were interested in looking is if this prompted any changes in electricity trade, and specifically with France, right? Because as Natalia also mentioned, with the mechanism, the price differential would increase, and the mechanism would benefit French consumers in the form of larger congestion rents. So the way in which we try to approach these questions is with a relatively novel methodology, this causal impact method that was introduced by Brothers et al., and that extends the difference in difference approach to time series analysis by explicitly defining a structural model that predicts a counterfactual before and after the intervention by creating a synthetic control. It does so in a Bayesian structural time series framework, which allows us to perform posterior inference on the counterfactual. And the key assumption here is that the variables we include in a model must be independent of the measure that we try to assess. It involves several steps, and the first thing we had to do is to predict with a higher accuracy the BPSC daily series, and for that we needed to select the variables that allow us to extrapolate this series with the minimal error. To do that, we find that a key variable is which gas price we should use to model this series, and instead of deciding based on other criteria, we decided to model or allow the data dictate our decision. And for that, we estimated a model in which we, we estimated several models, and what we did is to check which of them had the higher predictive power and the lower root mean square error. And what we did, what we can see in this graph, is precisely this root mean square error, and we can see that when you assign all the weight to the TTF price instead of the MIP gas, that is the other gas price we have as a reference here in Spain, we have the lower prediction error, and hopefully the highest accuracy to predict the VPSC series. However, there was a growing presence of MIP gas in contracts during 2022, and we thought we should reflect this in the model, even though the root mean square error told us that TTF should be, all the weights should be to the TTF. And as a balanced solution, we created a weighted price, 20% of MIP gas and 80% of TTF. Then we use another controls like an autoregressive of order length of the price series, daily production volumes of wind and solar power plants, and also dummies to control for regulatory changes. The regression suggests that as in line what we saw based on the root mean square error, that the most accurate model to predict the VPSC price is when you use only the TTF price or a combination of TTF and MIP gas. But as robustness check, when we estimate the impact of the measure, we will use these three models, only TTF, MIP gas, and this combination to see what happens. Then what we do is to introduce this component into the Bayesian structural time series framework. And since these are part of a state space model, we have this observational equation, which has a linear regression based on the covariates I just explained, and with mu and gamma, that are the state equations, that in this case are mu is a random walk and is the local component, and gamma represents the seasonal component, and in our model specifically it represents weekdays. With all of that, we estimate the counterfactual series on the VPSC series, and the impact on the mechanism would be just the difference between what we observe and our counterfactual. So directly jumping into the results on the impact on final electricity prices, the first thing we see is that regardless of the gas price we use, or the weighted average, the measure reduced significantly VPSC prices, but using the TTF or the weighted price, it had a larger downward adjustment in these prices, ranging between 20 and 27%. Whereas when we use MIP gas, we have a smaller effect. This difference comes from the divergence between MIP gas and TTF over the period we analyzed, and the TTF was higher than the MIP gas over this period, and should the combined cycle power plants used this Iberian gas price as a reference, the savings would have been lower. In all the three models, that's the advantage of using this Bayesian structural time series framework. We could perform posterior inference on the counterfactual, and we conclude that this effect that we observe occurs without the measure is very low, so we can say that the causal effect is significant in all three cases. In monetary terms, the average reduction or the savings, here we plot the observed prices minus the counterfactual, and we can see that the average reduction in the price was of 130 euros per megawatt hour, and considering household consumption, we estimated that the average household savings since the entry into force of the mechanism until the end of 2022 to be about 200 euros. But I mentioned at the beginning that the gas cap might not only have affected price development, but also the structure or the use of different generation technologies in the electricity market, and this also has an impact on potential savings. And here we will focus on gas-fired power generation. And to quantitatively evaluate this possibility, we apply the same approach as we did with the VPSC series to gas-fired power generation. And in this graph, you can see the estimated causal effect, and we can see that it's significant and positive regardless of the gas price we used. When we plot the difference between the observed generation and the counterfactual, we see that this effect seems to disappear within a few weeks after the introduction, since the blue line returns to the zero red line. And it should be noted that part of these results, or that this counterfactual estimate that the electricity generation with this technology that the counterfactual estimates assume that this result is independent from other things happening at the same time. And as I mentioned here, the increase in the use of gas-fired power generation coincide in time with outages of the nuclear fleet in France, a drought that reduced the use of hydro in generation, and these conditions, these results. And finally, what about electricity trade flows? Well, the lower prices in the Iberian Peninsula combined with these stoppages in the nuclear fleet and the lower hydro production increased external demand, as we can see here. Spain became a net exporter, and also trade itself increased significantly. But trying to assess the possible impact of the mechanism on these trade flows required us to adopt an indirect strategy, and what we did is first to model the wholesale price with this same BTST framework, and then compare this counterfactual price series with the French spot price. And what we see is that the French price would have been higher than the Spanish price for the most of the period, meaning that the increase in external demand from France would have remained the same. Similarly to what happened with gas-fired power generation, we should note that this price difference does not fully allow to distinguish between the effect of the mechanism and the effect of the French nuclear fleet outages and the drought during this period. So we cannot attribute the changes only to the Iberian exception. And finally, let me wrap up with the key takeaways and some limitations. According to our estimates, the mechanism had a measurable effect, and in fact, it reduced prices between 20 and 27%. And we are now working on a new version of this work with variables that allow us to ensure the independence of the covariates that we use in this analysis. We would like to see what happens with more detail in the free retail sector, but we don't have detailed data to do that. And on the other hand, the introduction of the cap may have generated other unintended effects, and in fact, may have created incentives to increase gas consumption in the power sector and also external demand for electricity, but due to temporally correlated confounding factors in these two areas, the results are not a definitive evidence of causality. And last but not least, we think that this contribution, based on a novel approach, offers a useful framework for evaluating future energy market interventions, illustrating how price-based mechanism can have far-reaching implications beyond immediate economic consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Javier Ferri on net zero transition and welfare in general equilibrium. Give me a second.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers for considering this paper and this conference. It's a pleasure for me to be here and sharing our work with so many specialists in this topic, to which I am a newcomer. This paper is joined with Javier Andres, Rafael Domenech, and José Emilio Bosca. We have changed slightly the title, by the way, because this is a new and we hope improved version with respect to the one we sent here. The motivation of the paper is very easy. So we are immersed in a transition period towards net zero emissions, and whatever we do, whatever we are going to do, is going to drive some effects on the economy, okay, on the dynamics of the economy. From this point of view, then, decisions in which strategy to employ during this transition should be based on three factors. Basically, the macroeconomic impact, the effect on emissions, and to sum up, the effect on welfare. In this paper, what we are going to do is to assess the transition for Spain using environmental dynamic general equilibrium model, okay? In the model, I'm not going to go through all the details of the model, but the model embodies three types of technological progress. Okay, one is technological progress that improve the relative efficiency in green energy production with respect to brown or dirty energy production. A second type of technological progress reduce the carbon a component of production in the brown energy sector. And finally, we have the typical and the most common technological progress that affects global efficiency. Using a plausible trend for the three types of technology, that is for the three types of technological progress, then we include in the model different types of policies in order to get with the net zero objective in 2050. Okay, and more particularly, we deal with these four policies, okay, and compare the effects. Basically, that's what the paper is about. Here, the takeaways. One idea is that, okay, heavily front-loaded policies, in the sense that, okay, in a quite unexpected way, there is some shock in the economy implied by some policy which keep constant afterwards, and that tries to aim the net zero at 2050. It can be good, it can be enough for getting the middle 2030 objective, but it's not enough to deal with the 2050 aim. Another takeaway is that we find that emission taxes will be preferable in terms of welfare during the transition period towards 2050. However, in the long run, in the very long run, okay, we mean up to 2200, then subsidies to green investment is unbeatable. More particularly, what we find is that to get the full target in 2050, we will need to increase linearly the carbon tax to 2,027 euros per ton of carbon. And in a coordinated scenario, by means of a coordinated scenario, we mean the fact in which we assume that all the rest of the world follow the same track as Spain in terms of emission reduction, okay? In this kind of coordinated scenario, that we get that the beneficial impact of welfare of this carbon tax that I mentioned before takes decades to materialize. But once it starts up, then in the very long run, there is important welfare effects of about 60% on average in terms of consumption equivalent. Okay, this is just an outline of the model. We have households that take decisions on consumption and working hours. The utility function here, this utility function is going to be the basis for our welfare measures. Okay, this is an intertemporal utility function. So households try to optimize welfare, the expected value of welfare for a very long time. Okay. These households also invest in 3 types of capital. This is important because we consider three types of capital. Capital that is used to produce green energy production, capital that is used to produce, in addition to fuel imported from the rest of the world, brown energy production, and capital that is used to produce the general goods and services in the economy. Yeah, just to mention here some of the basic ingredients in terms of equation of the model, okay? This equation here stands for the production of green energy, okay? That depends on capital, specific capital for green energy. And this is an efficiency variable. And we assume this efficiency variable grows according to this technological growth rate, okay? This can be interpreted as the relative technological progress of green energy production with regards brown energy production. Okay, brown energy production is produced using specific capital and also using this imported commodity that stands for fuel, basically. Okay, so this is the emission equation. This is the abatement, the notional abatement that can be done in the economy. All right, and this variable here stands for the carbon component on brown energy production, okay? And we assume it decreases exogenously at this rate, which is our second component of technological production. Okay, this is the mix, the energy mix that put together the green and the brown energy production. This is the production of goods and services in the economy that depends on capital, working hours, and the energy mix. Okay, this is the low motion of carbon in the atmosphere. This is a damage function, okay, a damage function that says that as carbon accumulates in the atmosphere, the productivity of the economy is going to decrease. And this is the technological progress for global efficiency in the economy for this one, okay? There is a government constraint. This government constraint says that from the point of view of the expenditures, we have expenditures related with general government spending and also subsidies to green investment. From the point of view of the revenues, we have taxes to household, and also we have revenues coming from taxes to the imported commodity on fuels and taxes on carbon, okay? So basically we have here 2 big blocks to address the decarbonization of the economy. One is due to technological components, okay, it's basically these 2 kinds of technological progress, and the other ones are particular mitigation policies, okay? Taxes or tariff on fuel commodities, green energy investment subsidies, and tax on carbon emissions, or any component and any combination of these 3. All right, so we calibrate the model in order to grasp some important facts regarding macroeconomic variables and also energy variables. In order to do that, we establish a clear division between green energy. By means of green energy, we mean all those kinds of energy that don't produce emissions, okay? Hydraulic, nuclear, renewable, and the rest is a catch-all block with the rest of energy sources. Okay, so important, because it's going to be the basis for our calculation, is to establish the baseline of the economy, okay? And the baseline of the economy is going to be driven by technological progress, okay? So we need to calibrate this kind of technological progress. In order to do that, we do that by finding the value of these 3 types of technological progress that will replicate, according to the model, will replicate what we observed in the Spanish economy between 2010 and 2019 in terms of GDP growth, okay? Carbon emission reduction. Notice this decoupling between growth and energy and emissions. And finally, the ratio between green and brown energy production, okay? So we calibrate in this way these 3 types of technological progress, and then we use the model to extrapolate what will be the trend for the Spanish economy with no policy at all, okay? Just due to this technological progress. And what we find is something like that, okay? This is the baseline scenario, and then together with the baseline scenario, we also consider a pessimistic scenario in which the rate of technological progress decreases by 1/3, and an optimistic scenario in which it increases by 1/3, okay? But the most important one is this benchmark, okay? So this is the target. This is the target of net zero emissions in 2050. So the gap between the target and what would the technological progress locate at in 2050, this gap should be closed by means of some kind of policy. This is the idea, okay? So this is what we represent in this table, okay? So we need, in 2050, in the case of the baseline scenario, an additional effort of a 38% reduction in emission with respect to the current situation, okay? So basically, okay. So what we do here is just to shock the economy in an anticipated manner, okay, such as in all the 4 cases that we can see there, we get the net zero emissions in the very long run in the absence of technological progress. Okay, this is our metric for comparison. And then we see what will be the macroeconomics effects. Okay, this is what this table displays. Okay, in blue you can see what is, from the point of view of the macroeconomic variables implied there, what will be the best policy. And in the red, what will be the worst policy, okay? And this only takes into account the period 2019-2050, okay? So for instance, see that a green investment policy displays the lowest average reduction in emission during this transitional period, okay? However, taxing the commodity, the fuel commodity, will display the highest effect, okay? Another important thing, for instance, this one. Okay, see that the green investment implies an important, okay, look at this. This is the energy mix distribution, okay? It implies an important increase in energy intensity, okay? So the economy doesn't become less energy intense, but the opposite happens, okay? And the opposite happens for the commodity price or for the emission taxes, okay? In this case, the energy intensity of the economy, on aggregate, goes down, okay? Okay, let me jump to this table reflects for the previous 4 policies what would be the welfare effect during the transition period and in the very long run, up to 2200, okay? Just look at the baseline. Okay, and the first message is that during the transition period, the welfare cost is not very high in terms of equivalent consumption, okay? It's not very high. So the highest one is this one, which is less than 2% on average in terms of consumption, okay? Another different thing is what happens in the very long run, okay? In the very long run, then we find more important welfare loss depending on the policy we apply. And the only one which displays a positive effect in the very, very long run is this green investment, okay? 23% of consumption. Okay, in this last column, what we do is a combination of emission taxes and green investment, okay? That means that we collect taxes and use the resources coming from taxes to subsidy green investment, okay? Another important message is that this is the most balanced policy in terms of the short and the long run, okay? With very little negative effect in the short run and positive, not as much as this one, but positive in the long run. Okay, and finally, what we do here is just to, okay, now we change our focus, okay, and we try to find what would be a particular scheme of carbon taxes to fully get the 2050 emission target, okay? Okay, this is basically the linear scheme increase in carbon taxes. Right-hand side is the scale, okay? This will be, this solid line will be the baseline scenario with no policy, and this is what will happen with the policy. See that in this case we get this target completely satisfied, okay? So in this case, we ask what will happen if the rest of the world will follow the same reduction pattern in emission as Spain, okay? And we call it coordination, okay? This is the coordination and this is the non-coordination. Spain, the weight of Spain in global emissions is very, very, very low, okay? So because this weight is very low, if Spain acts alone, then the temperature is going to increase. These are temperatures increase above pre-industrial levels, okay? But in the case of coordination, we will witness a small increase in temperature up to 2050, and then constant and slow but constant reduction in temperature, okay? And finally, we can ask what will be the welfare effects of a carbon tax under coordination and non-coordination in the short and in the long run, okay? And these are basically the results, okay? A small result of no coordination, a small negative effect of non-coordination during the transition period. Also, a negative effect, but even smaller in the case of coordination. But in the long run, look at here, in the long run, we will find an important negative effect on non-coordination, but a very, very positive effect of coordination, okay? And I think it's all. Yeah, thank you.
Here, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Javier. Final paper by Professor Monica Giulietti on household energy prices and well-being. Bear with me.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the colleagues from the chair for organizing yet another extremely interesting event and for the opportunity to talk about this work. You might notice that we also changed the title as we think the interesting contribution that we have to make in this area is related to a definition of resilience. An idea that we started developing following the energy crisis that we have mentioned several times today. So this is a piece of work with other colleagues from a variety of different universities, East Anglia, Sheffield, and myself from Nottingham, and we're all members of the UK Energy Research Centre. So my presentation will be mainly descriptive. The statistical work that we've done is relatively simple, and I was saying we believe that the most interesting contribution is about looking at household resilience in general and trying to identify categories of households that might be vulnerable to fuel poverty and all the issues with affordability in the energy sector. The context, I will discuss the context first, then look at our proposed definition, followed by a discussion of the key socio-economic factors that we see associated with this latent affordability issue, and then finally trying to establish some links with physical health and well-being. So the context past the energy crisis in 2022 is that we see, at least in the UK that we are focusing on, energy bills remaining relatively high, worryingly increasing debt associated with inability to pay bills, and the potential for improvements associated with energy efficiency relatively limited due to the fact that various support schemes have been devised and then abandoned, and as you will see in a moment, this remains an area where there's potential for improving things. So looking at energy prices in the first instance, even after prices have started slowing down, we can see in the UK that during the main phase of the crisis, despite a universal support provided by the government of a £400 rebate, prices were 2/3 higher than the previous year, 2020-21, and up to January 2024, we can see that prices are about 50% higher than our reference point in 2021. So the support, the financial support of the government has been withdrawn, and despite the slowing down in prices, we see that bills remain relatively high. What is also concerning and highlighted by various charities that look at vulnerable consumers, we see phenomena of disconnection. And this is possibly due to self-disconnection or rationing, particularly observed for those consumers who have a pay-as-you-go payment system. So if they are not able to top up their credit, they will just lose access to energy services altogether. And Citizen Advice are one of the charities that keep an eye on this type of situation. Also, again, following the crisis point in the winter 2022-2023, energy debt continues to increase, and it's quite worrying in the lowest part of the diagram, this area of situations where there's no arrangement to repay debt. Energy efficiency, as I was saying, the UK is one of the European countries most challenged in this area, and particularly when we're looking at certain type of properties, very little progress has been made to mitigate the potential effect of prices. So our suggestion to try and identify policy recommendations in this area relies on an idea of resilience that has been established in the energy sector over a period of time, but mostly associated with supply-side dimensions. So we talk about resilience of the energy system to external shocks, while our focus is more associated with the ability to adapt in the presence of shocks, but adaptation that happens at the household level. And this, we think, is a concept, an idea, a definition that can help us identify situations of vulnerability. So our focus is on at a household level. The relationship that we're trying to establish starts from exogenous external energy price events, then look at the effects that this might have on bills, energy efficiency, and incomes. And then we identify two main areas where this effect can be problematic from the point of view of vulnerable household, the dimension of thermal comfort, which has been considered in traditional studies of fuel poverty, but also the dimension of financial security, which we consider as our additional contribution in this context. And then, of course, to close the circle, we try and look at the potential effect of this resilience on physical health and well-being, including mental well-being, financial distress, psychological distress due to financial challenges. And this has led us to establish this idea or this definition of household energy price resilience, which is the ability to maintain or reattain sufficient levels of thermal comfort or financial security when we observe disruptive energy price events. Having established this concept, we try to measure it in some way, if this works, and apply our proposed definition to a representative sample of the UK population, the Understanding Society, which is a longitudinal survey of the UK, over a period that goes from January 2016 to May 2022. So in this first phase of our analysis, we are missing out the winter 22, which has potentially been even more problematic than what we can pick up through our data. And then in terms of practically measuring this concept of energy price resilience, we identify 4 measures that are available in the longitudinal survey that we are using. The first dimension looks at a traditional measure of fuel poverty, identifying those households where they spend at least 10% of their income on energy. And the UK system, this measure is used in different countries. In the UK, most recently, a different measure has been introduced, the low income, high cost measure, and we also carried out the same analysis using that with similar results to what I'm presenting today. And then a subjective measure of thermal comfort, the ability to keep the property warm. So within our sample, we have 17% in the first category, 5% in the second category, and 20% overall that experience either of the 2 issues or potentially both. The second dimension, which is associated to the financial security issue, looks at households that are finding it difficult to manage their finances, and also people who are behind on their bills. 7% in the first category, 5% in the second, and 10% that might be experiencing one of the 2 or both. And summing up in terms of what we see in the households that we identify, basically the highlight measure is the 25% of the household fall in the category of having low energy price resilience. So 75% in our sample don't suffer from challenges to the ability to afford thermal comfort or are not subject to financial security concern. But the remaining 25% is subject to at least one of those 4 considerations, 4 issues that I've previously mentioned. And so the next phase of our analysis looks at what socioeconomic categories are associated with this situation of low energy price resilience that makes them vulnerable to any unexpected change to energy prices. Our results were based on fixed effects models with fixed effects for households and also time dummies to pick up any trend that there might be in our data. And quick summary of our results indicates that factors that are associated with being unable to afford energy services are the inability to save or lack of access to savings. People who have these pay-as-you-go payment systems, prepayment meters, are also associated with low levels of resilience. And then there's a series of factors such as unemployment, retirement, a single-parent family, disability, and living in rented accommodation are all factors that are present as associated with low energy price resilience. In my previous presentation, I was saying there's two potentially separate factors. One is energy affordability or thermal comfort, and the other one is financial security. And our analysis reveals that for many socioeconomic categories, it's the affordability element, so the spending 10% of their income or energy or being unable to afford to keep the house warm, that dominates as a factor associated with various dimensions. So for prepayment meter users, for people who are retired, or people in rented accommodation, they all seem to suffer to an extent from this lack of resilience associated with affordability. When looking at the dimension of health and well-being, we notice that those households that are earmarked for low energy resilience tend to be associated with lower levels of life satisfaction and high levels of psychological distress in adults. We also looked at children and young adults, and also in their case we see lower levels of life satisfaction. Also in this context, the element of low affordability seems to dominate over the financial dimension. And finally, in terms of our suggested policy recommendation, we thought that the evidence that comes from this initial analysis of our proposed concept indicates that there are opportunities to target support. So the initial forms of intervention at the time of energy crisis were universal. Now the support has been removed, and there's an expectation that some more targeted intervention might be possible. And our suggestion is that these interventions should be carried out looking at all the different factors holistically. And one of the areas that are currently being considered in terms of potential policy interventions in the UK is the introduction of a social tariff. And if that was the case, once again, we would need to look at what categories of household might need to be offered this type of support. That was all for my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Monica. Now it's time to take some of your questions from the floor. One over there on the panel, and then over there, three, and then if there is time. We collect a few questions and then
sure.
we go to the panel.
So just first one for Monica. Yes, a really nice work. So we've talked about it before. I'm just kind of, I guess I have a question around the mechanisms diagram, and you've kind of got linear mechanisms, in place where you've got income, and then you've got resilience, and then you've got other outcomes. And like, you've been very careful to talk about associations and not causality, but I suppose I'm thinking about things like life satisfaction and how that might relate to income, and you could have reverse causality. And I guess what I'm wondering is, is there anything you can exploit in the panel structure to try to get more causal estimates for some of them? So potentially big changes in resilience, and looking at some kind of thresholds to see if you can that can help you identify some of the outcomes on the right-hand side. And then just one question for Tobias. Yeah, just wondering if you could say more about the mechanisms, so the main mechanisms that are at play in driving your results. And I suppose whenever, I'm just kind of wondering what kind of within-country variation might the national level analysis be masking. And I'm wondering, is there any potential to expand the analysis by doing a more kind of disaggregated analysis, looking at within-country variation? Yeah, they're my two comments.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anupama Sen, over there.
My question is to Natalia. In addition to the effect that you control, looking at what happened with the French power plant, have you considered also to check if there was some effect coming from the fact that the wind blow very few hours during the same period? I think that's a nice element to check also.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. All right. Very quickly, I just had one comment for Tobias and then one question for Monica. So Tobias, a very interesting presentation. And I too had a question similar to Dara, which was there are lots of countries in the developing world which have autocratic regimes and federal systems. So they have federal policies around electricity and energy. But they have quite strong provincial governments, which have been very successful in rolling out decentralized renewables. I'm thinking of places like China, for instance. So wondering whether you've thought about extending your analysis to in-country and specifically those regimes to sort of see what the results are. And then for Monica, a quick question. Loved your presentation and the idea of resilience. And I wondered whether rather than households becoming more resilient, can we make energy systems more resilient for households? You talked about things like warmth in a home. And I remember at one point there was a lot of discussion about energy as a service and charging for the number of rooms that you can warm in your home rather than per kilowatt hour. And I wondered whether those sorts of models are a potential solution to the affordability aspect of resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Natalia. And if I understood well, you estimate this synthetic control method in which the Dutch TTF is the best explanatory variable, but there is some evidence that during the energy crisis, this price has been distorted, okay? And that during this period, the MIP gas price is a better alternative or is less distorted. Also, it's internally distorted by this, as you mentioned, this increased demand by the Iberian exception, but it's a better alternative than the Dutch TTF. Then I wonder if in this particular case, it's better to use the MIP gas than the Dutch TTF that was the best explanatory variable in a non-crisis period. Thank you.
My question is for Javier. I really like the fact that you ended up with the investments and the taxes as the kind of more balanced scenario. My question is about how you calibrated the relationship between those different policies and the rate of technological progress. So obviously you showed us and you discussed in detail or more detail the calibration of, between 2010 and 2019 for the efficiency of green energy generation. But one thing that it'd be good to hear how you did it, or how maybe you could do it going forward, is what the relationship will be between these more aggressive policy packages and the rate of technological change in one sector versus another.
Thank you. We take one last question from over there, and then we go one by one through the panel.
Thank you. Just one doubt for the first speaker. I think I have a doubt about the energy sector variable that you use in the model. I would like to know why you choose these two indicators, such as the percentage of nuclear per fossil fuel, also electricity imports, how this affect your model, or why do you use this? Also, just one doubt, or maybe sometimes the methodology is so fast that maybe I didn't catch everything for the third, Javier. Yes, yeah, just one doubt. Maybe I didn't understand well, but you talk about the energy intensity, and you mentioned that it was higher when we did the green investments, right? I don't know if this is because of the model. This is a static model, right? I don't know if this is not taking into account the progress of the technology progress. I would like to know more about it. And also for the welfare effect, do we take into consideration the disposable income of consumers? This is how we measure the welfare effect of this model and this general model. Thank you.
For the benefit of time, I'd like to ask the speakers to go one by one and address the questions efficiently. Yeah. Thank you.
You hear me? Hello? Yeah. Okay, thanks for the question and suggestions. I will start with the more regional analysis. So it actually came up, and the good part of the regional authority index is that it exists on the national level, but also on the regional level. So you have this measure for individual regions. So we were actually thinking about maybe extending the work or doing a separate study. One main issue is, of course, data, because it's more hard to get generation data and so on regional level than on national level. As to the mechanisms, like there were several, just as an example, the democratization mechanism would be, for example, that you have these kind of new stakeholders and agents in the renewable energies, like even prosumers who put their own solar roof panels, or small cooperatives or municipalities who are all new actors. And if the state is more decentralized, so these kind of local or regional levels of government get more power, we think that this active participation of these new stakeholders and agents is more possible than in a system where, for example, municipalities or cities don't have these kind of powers. Another example is the regional policy channel, where we say that, as an example in Germany, that not all of the states really like the renewable energy transition, but some do it more than others. And if these regions have more in the self-autonomy, they are able to introduce their own renewable energy policies independent of the central government. So if they don't, let's say, like the policy, the national policies, they can try to implement their own policies. And regarding the energy sector variables, we just followed the literature who use these kind of variables also as a control for a kind of lobby effect to see how strong or how large the share of this kind of conventional or nuclear energy sources are in the overall mix. I don't know if your concern was directly related to using a share, but we also used per capita generation, for example, for fossil fuel or nuclear energy, and the results did not change that much. I don't know if that answered everything. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, thank you as well for the question. I will start with you, Elisa. Yes, I didn't explicitly mention, I think, in the last two models, but we incorporated wind production in the model as a control, and we are now working instead at incorporating weather variables such as solar irradiation, hours of sun, and wind speed, trying to control for that effect and to be more precise and ensure the independence of the result. And then, Rafa, about the choice of the gas price, I must admit this has been the most contested part, even among us authors, and we reached to people in the energy sector as well, and because we were really puzzled by this result. And in the end, we followed the data. We divided the MIB gas prices and the TTF between a training and test period, taking into advantage this divergence that you mentioned. And even by doing that, we still conclude that the TTF was a best predictor of the BPSC price. And again, talking with different stakeholders, they told us that, not in confidence, but that it was like the reference price. So that's why in the end we decided with this 20-80% weighted price, but I completely agree that the results change significantly, and it's something we need to take into account and make it very, very explicit in the analysis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura, for your question, which I consider extremely interesting. Actually, we have it in our research agenda because in the current version, the technological progress is completely exogenous. Okay, so we don't have this mechanism of what will be the effect of the policy, the particular policy on the rate of growth, technological progress. We don't go through that. The exercise is just okay. Taking what we observed between 2010 and 2019 as a benchmark for setting an exogenous value for these three types of technological progress, okay? So take it as the business as usual, extrapolate it to 2200, okay? And see what will be the effect of complementing this business as usual behavior of technology with some type of policy. Okay, this is the exercise. We also do this type of, okay, what will happen if this technological progress will increase by 1/3, okay? So just to see, to understand by how much, quite significant increase in the technological progress will narrow the margin for policy and hence the negative effect on welfare, okay? But you are right, so it's very important to understand and to analyze all the mechanisms behind the interaction between policy and technological progress. We don't get that. And regarding the other question, it's also very important to understand how welfare is measured. In our model is a dynamic model, right? And here welfare is measured in terms of equivalent consumption. That means that basically what we do is, as welfare depends on consumption, also on leisure, but it depends on consumption, what we do is to add consumption to households in order to equalize the welfare before and after the policy change, okay? So that increase in consumption, if we have to increase consumption in the baseline to reach the new welfare after the policy, then there is an increase in welfare that can we measure in terms of consumption in this way, okay?
Try to be quick and efficient. So regarding the first point, reverse causation is a big issue in this area, and a lot of the debate is also about, is fuel poverty a completely different issue from poverty? So there's a lot of complex problems in this context. In technical terms, what we've done, we tried to check for an observed variable bias, technically trying to sort of identify boundaries to our estimated values. But in more practical terms, one of the areas that we're thinking about at the moment is looking at households that fall in and out of government schemes, so that are in a certain situation, and then you look at what happens to them where they are no longer in that situation. That might be a way of trying to evaluate what's behind the vulnerability. And given there's now a new set of data, there's sort of another year of information, a longer period of time, we might be able to pick that up given available data. And then regarding the issue of energy as service, certainly this has been debated for a while. In my view, that presents a challenge of household needing some external support in terms of information provision in order to develop a different behavioral pattern of consumption. And in that context, a big issue well known is the issue of trust. So who's the most trusted and better positioned agent, institution that can provide that level of support leading to these changes. But certainly, yes, in addition to prices, there is the possibility of looking at more behavioral issues. Thank you.